So now the Democrats, or some of them, are telling our troops to not obey Trump's illegal orders, which is kind of crazy. What are they talking about? Which illegal orders? Where has he done anything like that? Let's take a look at Maria Bartiromo talking about the illegal orders that Democrats think that the president is handing out there. Not true, but in any case, welcome to Verbal on Life. My name is Noel. Over here, just want to bring you Sunday Morning with Maria Bartiromo. Let's take a look. Where are we? Let's see if she talks about that and all the different things. Crazy.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Happy Thanksgiving week to all. Today, gratitude for the hottest country in the world. That's how President Trump describes America, with some $20 trillion of new investment expected this year alone. No wonder incoming New York City Mayor Mamdani wants to work with the president after what looked like a love fest first meeting between the self-described socialist and the capitalist president on Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got views a little out there, but who knows? I mean, we're going to see what works, or he's going to change also. We all change. I changed a lot from when I first came to office. I think he is going to surprise some conservative people, actually. And some very liberal people, he won't surprise them.
But with the Supreme Court decision on his emergency tariffs now looming and questions about affordability rising, how will the 2026 economy play out ahead of the midterm elections? Coming up, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett is here on the year ahead, along with Wyoming Senator John Barrasso on the economy, healthcare subsidies, and why some Senate Democrats are now telling the U.S. military to ignore Trump's directives. Plus, former director of national intelligence and now the president of the Kennedy Center, Rick Grinnell, is here on America's premier cultural institution, and a look back at a decade of attacks against President Trump. Then Mike Davis with a look at the case against former FBI Director Jim Comey. It's all coming up right here, right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And we begin this Sunday morning with President Trump's economic agenda as we get new clarity on the year ahead, and affordability takes center stage for the upcoming election year. New data from the Labor Department shows the U.S. economy added 119,000 jobs in the month of September, more than doubling expectations, ahead of more inflation data coming up this upcoming week. With the president telling me exclusively last month, investment into America could total $20 trillion by the end of this year on his watch. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, met with the president in the Oval Office last week, and he increased his investment into the U.S. to some $1 trillion next year, up from the initial $600 billion promised earlier by the de facto leader of the Saudi kingdom. All of this as the White House awaits the Supreme Court decision on President Trump's use of tariffs, expected soon. Now, if the Supreme Court rules against the Trump administration, the U.S. may have to pay back approximately $200 billion in tariff revenue, which has already been collected from importers. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, with me here last weekend, said he's not expecting a negative ruling, and he looks for a strong economy next year as the impact of the big, beautiful bill takes effect.
I think we are going to see a substantial acceleration in the economy in the second quarter, and I think we are also we're already seeing on many prices. As I said, we're bending that curve down, and the increase in real incomes. I think Americans are going to feel it in the first quarter, second quarter. I think 2026. Thanks to President Trump's signature plans, is going to be a great year for working Americans, for the markets.
President Trump is also floating the idea of sending out $2,000 rebate checks from tariff revenue. But some Republican lawmakers are pushing back at the proposal over concerns the money could cause another spike in inflation and could be better used to pay down debt. which, of course, is now above $38 trillion, partly due to the $7 trillion in unchecked new spending by the Biden administration. That, of course, caused inflation to spike to 40-year highs of 21.5% under Joe Biden's 4 years in the Oval Office. Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the National Economic Council Director, Kevin Hassett. Director Kevin Hassett, great to see you. Thank you for being here this morning. And to you, happy Thanksgiving. And we've got a lot to be grateful for. I want to get your take on what you're expecting for the new year, 2026, in the economy. What does that look like to you today?
Right. It's going to be an absolute blockbuster year ahead. And one of the signals you just mentioned, the jobs report that was double the expectation, the blowout jobs report. We've got GDP now for the last 2 quarters, almost 4% on average, maybe even a little bit above. And we're going to have a little bit of a hiccup in the 4th quarter because of the silly shutdown. But then things are really lifting off. And the fun thing, Maria, is that in the jobs report, you could already see it. That my staff tells me that in September and October, there have been more than 20 groundbreakings by major corporations to build new factories because President Trump said, let's expense those factories. Let's get those factories building. And then we saw in September a big surge in construction workers because they got to go build those factories. But the good news for the next year is that the factories are going to be in place and then people are going to start getting the jobs next to the machines and everything else. And so it really, really is a very, very promising set of data. And the only thing is that we're going to see a lot of whining from left-wing critics of the president about the 4th quarter because our estimate is that the shutdown cost more than we expected at the beginning because it had such a huge effect on this week ahead. So many people had to cancel their Thanksgiving plans because of the Democrat shutdown that we think the economic effect might be to cut economic growth about in half for the 4th quarter.
So you're talking about what, 1% growth in the 4th quarter? How would you assess?
1.5. I would say 1.5 or 2. Yeah, 1.5 or 2. But we're coming off a base of Trump growth of 4, and so subtract 1.5. That's how we get it.
Now, I know that there are a lot of positives here that you just mentioned, particularly related to what President Trump is doing, getting the supply chains back to America. But the issue of affordability is front and
Hold up, what's up with the sound? Sorry about that. The audio is gone. But yeah, we're talking about Trump's economic policies. Next year, 2026, everything should be way better, in my opinion. For some reason, the audio is gone.
So that we don't have to rely on China. How long will that process take so that we are actually independent of producing our own rare earth minerals and refining those minerals in America?
Well, you know, it takes a while to get these refineries going, but we've got lots of allies that are working on this. And we also have a collegial relationship, we believe, with China after the last meeting. And so I think that we have time to keep our economy running and to move towards a place where there's a more global supply of rare earths. I don't think that, frankly, any country should have a monopoly on anything because, you know, countries have problems sometimes. And then all of a sudden the whole world is disrupted. And so I think it's great for the long run economy, for the safety of all economies, for us to diversify the production of these things.
And let me get your take on the SCOTUS decision. We're waiting on the Supreme Court to have a ruling on whether or not the president can use the emergency reason to issue these tariffs. When are you expecting that decision, and what are you expecting?
I don't know when the decision's coming, but I can tell you that the decision depends on 2 things where I think the ground is as solid as it could be for us. One is it an emergency? Because we have emergency authorities. And if you think about all the deaths from fentanyl, the deaths of despair that Nobel Prize winning economist Angus Deaton wrote about from the places where trade shut down factories and closed down basically towns and villages. So the emergency case is solid. And then the next case is, well, can we use the tariffs? But the law says that we're allowed to regulate trade. And if you're going to regulate trade, then you can even either use a quota, an embargo, or a tariff. Those are the 3 things that you could do. And if you take a quota and auction it off, then it's mathematically the same as a tariff, and nobody thinks you couldn't do a quota. And so I think that logically we're about as solid as you could possibly be on both fronts.
All right, real quick before you go, the president wants to send out $2,000 stimulus checks. An analyst at Piper Sandler tells his clients this is unlikely. What are the odds we see those $2,000 checks go out next year?
Well, never underestimate President Trump, but in a time when we're being thankful for everything, don't forget, Maria, that we sent out $2,000 about checks already to everybody who has overtime or has tip income. And so President Trump wants to help fix the problem, fill the hole that Joe Biden created. And if we have the money, if the money keeps coming in, we're running a surplus right now over the last few months, then I'm sure that he'll be looking into that.
All right. We will see how that plays out. Good to talk with you, Kevin Hassett. Thank you.
You too, Maria. Happy
National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Happy Thanksgiving to you and family. Still to come, Kennedy Center Interim President Rick Grinnell is here, along with Article 3 Project President Mike Davis. But first, Democrat senators are suggesting the U.S. military refuse orders by the Trump administration. Senate Majority Whip, Wyoming Senator John Barrasso is here with reaction, as well as the impact of the Trump agenda. He's next. Stay with us.
I cannot wait to get that $2,000 stimulus check from Donald Trump. It is going to be a good day in America.
Posture matters.
Hold on, let me pause the commercials and go past that. But yeah, when Donald Trump sends out the stimulus check, we're going to be
legal orders.
No one.
Hold up.
Your Medicare plan. Are you
carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution?
Well, that's Senators Elisa Slotkin and Mark Kelly among a group of Democrat lawmakers with military and intelligence background urging service members in the U.S. military to, quote, refuse illegal orders, with critics saying it is a call to defy the commander-in-chief, President Trump. The president responded on Truth Social, labeling the video seditious behavior, and that is equal to punishable by death. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Watch.
Just to be clear, does the president want to execute members of Congress?
No. Let's be clear about what the president is responding to. You have sitting members of the United States Congress who conspired together to orchestrate a video message to members of the United States military, to active duty service members, to members of the national security apparatus, encouraging them to defy the president's lawful orders.
In recent weeks, congressional Democrats have introduced several bills aimed at Trump's presidential powers, including his ability to deploy the National Guard to crack down on violent crime in major cities in the U.S. and launching strikes on suspected drug cartel boats in international waters without requesting congressional approval beforehand. Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Senate Majority Whip, Wyoming Senator John Barrasso. Senator, good to have you this morning. Welcome.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Maria.
What is your reaction to your colleagues on the left telling U.S. military members to ignore President Trump's directive?
Well, what they're doing is wrong, and I believe it's dangerous, Maria. They have no right to tell members of the military to disobey. We're talking about active duty military, to disobey orders from their commanding officers. That's the way the military works, and it's up to the Supreme Court to decide what's constitutional, not 6 Democrats on social media. I think the president is absolutely right to be requiring and talking about legal responsibility and them being held accountable. These are the same Democrats who've been doing everything they can in the last 10 months to undermine President Trump, undermine the Republican Party and our efforts. Every one of them voted to raise taxes by $4 trillion. Every one of them voted for the shutdown and kept our country shut down and caused significant pain to the American people. That's who they are. They're not looking for solutions. They're part of the problem.
So is this just Democrats trying to clip the wings of President Trump with these new bills? What are these bills that are trying to lower President Trump's effectiveness and lower his power?
Well, you got it absolutely right. They're doing everything they can to undermine the president. That's why Chuck Schumer figured out his playbook to shut down the government. It was to hurt President Trump, to hurt the efforts of the country moving forward. They did tremendous damage. That was organized and orchestrated weeks in advance. Many of them wish the government was still shut down. In spite of the pain they've caused people who were working and weren't getting their paychecks, military members who weren't getting paid, in terms of what they did for people who were stranded traveling and how that hurt, and all of these people waiting for government assistance for food stamps, all of these people were hurt under this politics of pain by the Democrats. I think they're working overtime to do everything they can to undermine what President Trump and Republicans are trying to do, which is to make our country safer and more prosperous.
Well, look, we are less than 40 days away from the Affordable Care Act pandemic-era subsidies expiring. You've got 72 days or 70 days until a potential government shutdown. By the way, that's 2 days shy of Groundhog's Day, Senator. Are we going to see another Groundhog's Day, the end of January, where the government shuts down again?
Well, the goal is to not have that happen, Maria. Like, Republicans are focused on making life more affordable for American families, and that means more money in their pockets to buy gas and groceries and to heat their homes. And if you take a look at where we were a year ago and where we are now, there has been a dramatic reversal with President Trump and Republicans in terms of the border, in terms of energy, in terms of tariffs, in terms of trade, and in terms of America, peace through strength. That's what we're focused on. We have passed, as Kevin Hassert, your last guest, just talked about, this working families tax cut bill. All of these things are important and are going to put more money into people's pockets. By the end of the year, we will have broken a record for the number of punishing regulations that we've been able to repeal. And you're right, we need to get these appropriation bills done by the deadline date. We have 5 more to go, which will fund 88% of the government. And that way we can avoid the blackmail by Chuck Schumer of shutting down the government again. We need to get America back on track. We got more work to do. We're heading in the right direction.
I want to get your take on this $2,000 stimulus check, because there's an analyst out there at Piper Sandler who says it's unlikely. He says the only way that any stimulus checks could even be passed via legislation is through a second reconciliation bill. And that will have a deadline of October 1st, 2026. Are you expecting a second reconciliation bill next year?
Well, we certainly can do a second reconciliation bill. Certainly, President Trump is trying to put more money into the American people's pockets. That's what we're all working on. And he has been so successful bringing in tariff revenue. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. And the question is, what do you do with that money? And some are suggesting sending out checks. I am such a fiscal hawk, Maria. I am concerned about the size of our national debt. It's $38 trillion, as you pointed out at the beginning of the show. The interest alone on that is over $1 trillion a year. That's more than we spend on our military. So I think there would be some value in using some of that money to actually pay down our national debt.
You know, Senator, I was talking with Kirsten Sinema the other day. She joined me on Mornings with Maria, and I asked her straight out, why she left the Senate. She and Joe Manchin were very upset because they felt that the Democrats were going to eliminate the filibuster. Now, this has come up again with President Trump wanting to reopen government during that 43-day shutdown in terms of using the filibuster. Where are you on this issue? Because President Trump was getting real frustrated there at the end. A record-long government shutdown. He said the Republicans should do it alone. If you know in your heart of hearts that the Democrats, once they return to power, will eliminate the filibuster, why not just do it now?
Well, the president makes a very compelling argument. And Maria, I've always supported the filibuster because I believe it's a tool that Republicans can use to protect ourselves against the terrible things that Democrats would love to do. They would love for the Republicans to get rid of the filibuster. You know what the Democrats want to do? They've talked about it. They want to expand the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 with radical judges who really don't believe in the Constitution. They want to make D.C. and Puerto Rico states with 4 new Democrat senators. And they want to change the voting rules to eliminate voter ID, making it easier for illegal immigrants to vote. I'm against all of those things, and I'm going to continue to say, talking to other members of our delegation and the Republicans, I think the filibuster protects us from those sorts of things, and we can use a second reconciliation bill with 51 votes if need be.
Okay. Well, that's the key right there. Senator, I know that every year on Thanksgiving, you go visit our troops. Are you planning to do that again this week?
I've had the great privilege of visiting troops overseas. I go to see wherever Wyoming soldiers are. I'll be heading over to the European theater for Thanksgiving with Wyoming troops, talking with them. We'll bring maybe 20 members of the Wyoming military together for a big Thanksgiving meal, ask about their home families, their communities. Many of them, it's their first time away from home for Thanksgiving. Done it every year to thank them on behalf of the American people for what they do to keep us safe and to keep us free and to allow us to continue to live in this, the greatest country in the face of the earth.
We are so grateful you do that. And of course, we are incredibly grateful for our troops. Happy Thanksgiving, Senator. Thank you.
And to you, Maria. Thank you.
All right. Senate Majority Whip, Senator John Barrasso. Quick break, and then Interim Director of the Kennedy Center, Rick Grinnell, is here on the Democrat accusations that the Kennedy Center has strayed from its core mission. Plus, the former DNI on the political dirty trick still underway in Washington. Stay with us.
All right. Let me pause the commercials. But yeah, like I said earlier, if you're enjoying the stream, give it a thumbs up. And we got to celebrate the fact that Trump might be handing out stimulus checks coming up next year, hopefully by next October. All right, let me fast forward here.
One big, beautiful bill signed into law by President Trump back on July 4th. Now, Senate Democrats are launching their own investigation into the use of the Kennedy Center's $268 million budget, with Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse accusing my next guest in a letter of turning.
Sorry about that. The audio sucks. The audio's gone.
It's going to be a completely different place. And when we arrive, exactly what we're doing. I wished Senator Whitehouse would have done a little bit of research before he did a hit job on us. But now that he has highlighted this, we're going to show that he is not only wrong, but that we're doing an incredible job with what President Trump has given us. We're raising more money than ever before, and we're cleaning up the books. We're making the place. If you haven't been to the Kennedy Center, you should come, because the renovations are unbelievable. It's going to be a completely different place. And when we arrived, the place was literally falling apart. I think Senator Whitehouse should propose putting a monument of President Trump at the Kennedy Center, because he literally saved it. I don't care what anyone says. Look at the facts. The place was literally and figuratively falling apart.
Wow.
And he saved it. Donald Trump completely saved this institution, and he should get credit for that.
Final question on this. I want to turn to your time as DNI, but do you want to say anything about the rental fee for FIFA? I know that FIFA is going to be at the Kennedy Center for the 2026 World Cup draw. Are they paying for it?
Oh, yes, they're paying big time. Look, Senator Whitehouse is wrong about just focusing on little rental fees, because rental fees assume that you rent a room and you stay in the room, and that's the whole fee. We couldn't do something like that for FIFA because they were completely taking over the whole place. So we made them do corporate sponsors and give us opportunities to do more sponsors. They're paying roughly $7.4 million in sponsorships by giving us the ability to use them, and they're writing a big check, and they're paying for all of the expenses. This is going to be net positive for the Kennedy Center. If Senator Whitehouse had just attended one single meeting, he would have realized that we're doing the right things. You can't just focus on a rental room, somebody leaking some rental contract. We didn't want to just charge FIFA a rental fee. That would have been an extremely small fee.
Rick, I want to get your take about what has taken place since you were DNI. You're the former DNI. Also, you are presidential envoy for special missions of the United Nations. This last 10 years and this investigation ongoing on whether or not it is a conspiracy, beginning with Russia collusion, where one political campaign, Hillary Clinton, came up with a lie about her political enemy, and it goes viral across the world, to the Hunter Biden laptop, to impeachments, and then 90-plus indictments against President Trump, the Mar-a-Lago raid. What do you want to say about what we have just experienced for 10 years of attacks against this president?
Well, it's clear to me that the bureaucracy led by the Democrats and the press are going to attack President Trump every time he tries to reform Washington. They don't want to reform. They like the system the way it is. And so when you look at the very beginning, when President Trump arrived in 2017, really beginning in 2016 with the election, the intelligence community and others had so many bad apples that they went after President Trump and created the Russian collusion hoax and all of these other things. This video that these Democrat elected officials are doing now is a call to arms to try to get the last remaining few people within the intelligence community, within the bureaucracy, to at the very beginning when President Trump arrived in 2017, really beginning in 2016 with the election, the intelligence community and others had so many bad apples that they went after President Trump and created the Russian collusion hoax and all of these other things. This video that these Democrat elected officials are doing now is a call to arms to try to get the last remaining few people within the intelligence community, within the bureaucracy, to stand up and fight. I think it is an outrageous video. We should call it out constantly. What they're trying to do is mount an insurrection from within. And President Trump is right to be extremely angry. And I hope that John Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard understand that they've got to dig deep now to figure out how do we stop any of these leaks that are clearly going to be coming.
And you believe the lie that was Russia collusion actually led to the current state of affairs with this Russia war on Ukraine?
Oh, there's no question about that. They have propped up a phony intelligence. It goes back to the early days of Ukraine. It goes back to the early days of Ukraine. And now what you see is a president who's completely focused on trying to find a solution after Joe Biden spent 4 years not talking to Putin and literally digging us into a deeper hole. And we have to dig our way out. And clearly everyone is frustrated with the ongoing war. Thank God we now have a remnants of a peace plan. And what we need to do is work really hard to make sure that both sides accept that. There is no alternative.
And speaking of the peace plan, Marco Rubio tweeted this out. The peace proposal was authored by the U.S. It is offered as a strong framework for ongoing negotiations. It is based on input from the Russian side, but it is also based on previous and ongoing input from Ukraine. Should we be buying that Russia will actually agree and stop the killing at some point, Rick?
Well, look, if anyone can do it, President Trump can do it. You've got Steve Witkoff and our great Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. They can operationalize this. President Trump is the best person to show the threats, to show the carrots and the sticks of how to solve these problems. Again, we got ourselves into a huge hole, the United States, because Joe Biden literally ignored one side of this and never tried to pick up the phone to figure out what's the problem. How do we solve the problem? President Trump is so great at being able to talk. And our great Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, they can operationalize this. President Trump is the best person to show the threats, to show the carrots and the sticks of how to solve these problems. Again, we got ourselves into a huge hole, the United States, because Joe Biden literally ignored one side of this and never tried to pick up the phone to figure out what's the problem. How do we solve the problem? President Trump is so great at being able to talk to both sides, listen, present the America First argument. Talking is a tactic. It's not the goal. And we need to be able to have diplomacy with muscle. And that's exactly what President Trump allows diplomats to have.
And that's why he's, we're up to 8 wars that he has helped end. Rick Grinnell, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Presidential Envoy for Special Missions of the United States. Thank you so much, sir. We'll be right back.
Let me skip through the commercials. And yeah, we got the best president. Thank God for him winning. Now let me fast forward past the commercials here.
This crime, conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241. And this goes all the way to the top of the Obama administration. President Obama, Vice President Biden, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Jack Smith, Jay Bratt, Andrew Weissman. There are so many dirty actors in this this ongoing criminal conspiracy. Crimes has committed a very serious crime, conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241, and this goes all the way to the top of the Obama administration. President Obama, Vice President Biden, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Jack Smith, Jay Bratt, Andrew Weissman. There are so many dirty actors in this this ongoing criminal conspiracy against rights. These people must be held accountable. I know that the new Miami U.S. attorney has opened up a grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida, that's going to be impaneled in January. And I would tell these lawfare Democrats they better lawyer up.
Well, I mean, is it just this cabal of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the others that you mentioned, and then they just send the orders to everyone else? Because it seems like the Democrats are very coordinated about their attacks on President Trump and their efforts to take him down.
And they've been doing this for more than 8 years. They've been doing this Russian collusion hoax since the 2016 campaign, where they made up the Russian collusion hoax to cover up Hillary Clinton's corruption when she was the Secretary of State and the Clinton Foundation was taking millions of dollars from shady foreign actors. What was Hillary Clinton doing in exchange for that money to the Clinton Foundation that was underfunding the Clintons' lavish lifestyle? And they made up the Russian collusion hoax. They weaponized it against President Trump. They tried to destroy his campaign in 2016. They tried to destroy his presidency. And when he declassified Crossfire Hurricane and tried to release it publicly, they did the Mar-a-Lago raid, and then they tried to release it publicly. They did the Mar-a-Lago raid, and then they tried to take him out with lawfare. Justice has to be served here.
I mean, justice has to be served, but you just mentioned Obama. Do you really believe that Obama is going to get indicted?
Presidents have presidential immunity for their official acts. At a minimum, he could be named as an unindicted co-conspirator.
I see. Mike, stay with us, because the Wall Street Journal headline on this next story: Comey prosecution on the ropes after a series of missteps. I want you to take that on for us when we come back. Mike Davis is with us. We'll be right back.
Obama is not going to go to jail, but yeah, definitely he ruined his name going up against Trump. I think everybody that went up against Trump ruined their name. All right. Let's see what else. Let me go past the commercials. Where are we? Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you are enjoying the show, give it a thumbs up. And let's move on. Let's see what's next.
Latest messaging from the White House on efforts to end the war on Ukraine. In moments, I'll speak live with the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Olga Stefanishyna, about Ukraine's input into this U.S.-authored 28-point plan. Today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is leading a delegation in Geneva to talk with European security officials about this plan that's received backlash this weekend from Western leaders and some U.S. lawmakers. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst is live with the latest. Hey, Trey.
Jackie, good morning. Talks are taking place today in Geneva, Switzerland, aimed at ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. These conversations include officials from the U.S., Ukraine, and a variety of European countries, all trying to rally behind Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about the negotiations and a 28-point peace plan that has circulated in recent days.
I have signed a decree on the composition of the Ukrainian delegation and approved all relevant directives. Our representatives know how to protect Ukrainian national interests and exactly what is needed to prevent Russia from carrying out a third invasion, another strike against Ukraine. Another strike against Ukraine.
Zelensky did not go into details about the 28-point peace plan that would require Ukraine to give up more territory in the east of their country and limit the size of their military. Some U.S. senators say that Secretary of State Marco Rubio told them the plan was a Russian wish list and not the actual plan. A State Department spokesperson responded to those comments, saying they were blatantly false, with Secretary of State Rubio saying in an ex-post, quote, "The peace proposal was authored by the U.S. It is offered as a strong framework for ongoing negotiations. It is based on input from the Russian side, but it is also based on previous and ongoing input from Ukraine." We're also hearing directly from the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, who warned that his troops would take more territory by force if the Ukrainians don't agree to the plan.
We have this text. We received it through existing channels of communication with the U.S. administration. I believe it can be used as the basis of a final peaceful settlement, but it has not been discussed with us in detail.
There is certainly a level of irony with the Russian leader talking about a peaceful settlement, since he is the man who ordered the initial full-scale invasion. But we do expect to get more information on this critical meeting today in Switzerland in the hours and days ahead. Jackie?
All right, Trey Ying's for us. Thank you so much, Trey. For more, let's bring in the Ukrainian ambassador to
be used as the basis of a final peaceful settlement, but it has not been discussed with us in detail.
There is certainly a level of irony with the Russian leader talking about a peaceful settlement, since he is the man who ordered the initial full-scale invasion. But we do expect to get more information on this critical meeting today in Switzerland in the hours and days ahead. Jackie?
All right, Trey Ying's for us. Thank you so much, Trey. For more, let's bring in the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, ᗷᖇEᗩKIටිG. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for being here. This is a very big weekend. How big, or how close, rather, are you to reaching an agreement? The president had given a Thursday deadline for Ukraine to respond, then seemed to suggest that maybe this isn't the final offer, but we are hearing that everyone is hopeful this might be very close. Is that true?
Well, if speaking from the perspective, since the first day of the full-scale invasion, probably this momentum and these discussions which are taking place right now in Switzerland, period, in international engagements, because the commitment of U.S. president and U.S. leadership and the team is really strong. And as it was said, this is only the first proposal on the table. And indeed, it's a wish list. It's not a document or an agreement. It's just a list of the points. It's been discussed right now, and it is an agreed line with Ukraine and the United States that it will be a constructive reconciling process.
Okay. Are there any items in this wish list, as you described it, that are non-starters for Ukraine? There's been a lot of concern raised that handing over parts of the Donbass that Russia does not control would basically give them a straight shot to Kyiv. Ukraine has obviously fought tooth and nail to defend those parts of your country. And then also capping Ukraine's military and essentially cutting it by a third. The Europeans suggested that those two measures could make Ukraine more vulnerable to attack in the future. Is that the current assessment from Ukraine?
Well, there are like a lot of points in this plan, and indeed, European allies and partners are in Switzerland with us because a number of points are directly related to them and to NATO. But again, this is a wish list, a list of points. It's not an agreement. So
Europeans suggested that those two measures could make Ukraine more vulnerable to attack in the future. Is that the current assessment from Ukraine?
Well, there are like a lot of points in this plan, and indeed, European allies and partners are in Switzerland with us because a number of points are directly related to them and to NATO. But again, this is a wish list, a list of points. It's not an agreement, so the agreement should be as precise as possible. This, additionally to 28 points, there is a security assurances proposal from U.S. on the table, and it all should be embodied in in the agreement. So teams are still working in Switzerland. Not yet final statements have been done. President has nominated chief of his office Andrei Yermak as a chief of delegation. Also, the chief of military intelligence Kirill Budanov is also part of the delegation. So this is a rather strong background on that.
But is handing the Donbass over a red line?
It's not something related to undermining the sovereignty, and it also says de facto. So the discussions are around that.
Okay. How much of this plan did Ukraine write? You heard the Secretary of State say that it was U.S. authored with input from the Russians, but also input from Ukraine. A White House official told me that point 26, amnesty to all parties, was actually written by Ukraine. And they said it previously said, before the revisions from Ukraine, that Ukraine will conduct a full audit of all the aid received and create a legal mechanism to recover any errors found and punish those who illegally profiteered from the war. Ukraine has obviously argued many times that Putin has committed. Give Putin amnesty?
I can, and I have to confirm that formally Ukraine received the document when Secretary of Army Driscoll was there, and this is what was confirmed by my president as something formal, which has been handed over to him. And this is the document I saw, and this is the basis on which the parties work right now in Switzerland. So, but what I know also, and I think it is really important, that there was a really strong commitment from U.S. Department of State and the White House to finally force Russia to put at least something on a paper, to avoid being played with the peace, I would say. So I think having Russians preparing their proposals is something that was the original intention, just to avoid the situation of being playing around the talks, the real intentions. And also Ukraine have been talking about stopping on the existing line, the ceasefire, and also European allies and the coalition of willing had their proposals. So this document, I cannot call it a combination of all of that, but these all the discussions which were taking place.
The suggestion, though, by some was that this language about amnesty being injected by Ukraine was somehow generated because of this corruption scandal that's happening within the government. Obviously, this corruption was uncovered by Ukrainian anti-corruption agencies and is being addressed. But the suggestion is that they were willing to basically trade amnesty for those officials for amnesty for Putin. Is that true?
Yeah, it's absolutely not correct to say that these are related.
The suggestion, though, by some was that this language about amnesty being injected by Ukraine was somehow generated because of this corruption scandal that's happening within the government. Obviously, this corruption was uncovered by Ukrainian anti-corruption agencies and is being addressed. But the suggestion is that they were willing to basically trade, amnesty for those officials for amnesty for Putin. Is that true?
Yeah, it's absolutely not correct to say that these are related amnesties. So you do not able, to put equal sign between, domestic exposures done by some domestic law enforcement institutions and peace and war issues and, political immunities for Ukraine. These are three different layers. Okay. And Ukraine has been standing for its freedom. The aggression started on our land, and we just defend ourselves. So whatever will be discussed further at this point is not part of this bigger framework.
The president indicated that this deal might be coming together quickly because Ukraine's military is in a bad spot. Listen to what he said this week.
They will lose in a short period of time.
But the whole of Donbass,
they're losing land. So we're in it for one thing.
And then the vice president also said there's a fantasy that if we just give more money, more weapons, or more sanctions, victory is at hand. What is the military assessment right now? Very recently, the president was saying that Ukraine is positioned to take back all of its territory. This sounds like there's been a change and that Ukraine is not doing so well. What's going on in the battlefield?
Well, I think the bottom line is that indeed there is an occupied territory because there is a Russian aggression on our soil. It's not the territorial war between Ukraine and Russia. It's the aggression and the atrocious war on our soil. So there are territories which are occupied. There are like a big combat line with more than 1,000 combat engagements, and some of the parts of the territory being occupied, some of the parts of the territory were deoccupied. So, and indeed, the winter is coming. It's not only about the front line; it's about the massive attacks to energy infrastructure, which causes millions and millions of losses in infrastructure and loss of the multiple lives of the civilians. This is what is really some of the parts of the territory were deoccupied. So, and indeed, the winter is coming. It's not only about the front line; it's about the massive attacks to energy infrastructure, which causes millions and millions of losses in infrastructure and loss of the multiple lives of the civilians. This is what is really serious. I cannot agree more that the situation is complicated, because what kind of situation could be not complicated when you have people dying in your country in the center of Europe?
So you're saying that the winter's coming. Obviously, it's concerning. It's concerning every year that the presence of these occupied territories and Russian troops and the aggression is a concern. But you wouldn't say that Ukraine is losing right now. These are very, different terms, losing and winning. So we have been winning to remain as a state and depriving Russia from the ability to declare anything from the goals they had in 2022. And very quickly, because we're almost out of time, this sanctions bill that's in Congress, what have you heard from lawmakers about how likely it is to get a vote? Is the administration supportive of it?
Well, I believe that when the Congress and Senate will reconvene in the beginning of December, nothing in the existing process on negotiations on this peace deal should be a precondition for delaying the voting on the bill.
Okay.
I think the stronger the position of the United States, the more Russians are committed to the real deal. Because at this point, this wish list and the letter of intentions of 28 points this wish list and the letter of intentions of 28 points is nothing but the pretext for Russia to further manipulate, because everything they propose there is very manipulative, and you can read it in a double way as long as you want.
Okay. Ambassador Olga Stefanishyna, thank you very much for joining us in the Sunday briefing. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jackie, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, some schools are fearing disruptions as the White House begins dismantling the education department. Secretary Linda McMahon joining me live, coming up next.
All right. Let me pause the commercial. If you're enjoying the show so far, give us a thumbs up and try to get more video out there. Trump's doing great.
State Superintendent Chris Rakedahl said these changes increase the number of federal agencies with oversight of K-12 education fivefold, undoubtedly creating confusion and duplicity for the educators, administrators, and families across the nation who engage with ED staff regularly. What do you say to that? Is there anything to the idea that if you take these responsibilities and you put them in 5 other agencies, that now the schools and educators have to deal with 5 agencies instead of 1?
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me very much this morning. And by the way, belated happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Now, actually, this is not a back of the envelope whimsical plan that we are doing. And this is not something that we've already said, okay, this
for the educators, administrators, and families across the nation who engage with ED staff regularly. What do you say to that? Is there anything to the idea that if you take these responsibilities and you put them in 5 other agencies, that now the schools and educators have to deal with 5 agencies instead of 1?
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me very much this morning. And by the way, belated happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Now, actually, this is not a back of the envelope whimsical plan that we are doing. And this is not something that we've already said, okay, this is the way all this is going to work. We have done 1 IAA interagency agreement so far. That was with the Department of Labor. We did that weeks ago before the shutdown because it was a small group that was going over it. We detailed about 13 personnel over to the Department of Labor, and it was to work on WIOA grants and to the Perkins Act grants to see. We wanted to make sure it worked. They have a more sophisticated system of technology than we do. We've already drawn down 200 grants, delivered them to 35 states, and I would venture to guess that those states didn't know where that funding was actually flowing through and coming back to them, because that is the goal, and that is to make sure they get their money in a more efficient way. The new 6 that we announced just last week was that there would be 2 more going to labor, and a big chunk of what is now at the Department of Education would go over to labor K through 12. But it's just a matter of pass-through of funding. It is not policy.
Sorry about that. The audio is going out. Let me try to fix this problem here real quick.
He's going to have a vote in the Senate, but Speaker Johnson hasn't made the same commitment.
Yeah, there's been obviously pushback on 3 years from Republicans saying that just probably can't get support that you would need from Republicans, because there's this belief that, ACA was supposed to bring down costs. Instead, you've seen these companies profiting and pocketing the subsidies. And there's a really rampant belief that the system is broken and that 3 years would be too long. So I'm hearing you right to say that you would.
He's going to have a vote in the Senate, but Speaker Johnson hasn't made the same commitment.
Yeah, there's been obviously pushback on 3 years from Republicans saying that just probably can't get support that you would need from Republicans, because there's this belief that, ACA was supposed to bring down costs. Instead, you've seen these companies profiting and pocketing the subsidies. And there's a really rampant belief that the system is broken and that 3 years would be too long. So I'm hearing you right to say that you would sign a 1 year as long as there was work done after that, right?
But we have to make a commitment that we're actually going to have a vote and do an earnest effort to fix this. I mean, literally 15 years since ACA has been introduced, there are millions of people covered right now. And regardless of whether you represent a blue or a red, district, people are signed up, and we don't want children and families in need to forego getting preventative care because it's too expensive to see a doctor.
Okay. ᗷᖇEᗩKITG, thank you very much for joining us on the Sunday briefing. I really appreciate your time, and welcome to Washington.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to clarify your answer to Stephen Nelson. He asked about your comment calling the president a fascist, and your answer was, both President Trump and I have been clear about our positions and our views. President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about.
That's okay. You can just say
okay.
Yes. So,
Okay.
It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
President Trump and New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani shocking both the left and the right following a friendly Oval Office meeting after months of attacks. For more, let's bring in Tennessee Republican Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us in the Sunday briefing. Appreciate your time, sir.
That goes to show is all politics, man. They don't mean it.
Thank you, ma'am.
What was your reaction to seeing the president all smiles with Mamdani? I think it shocked a lot of people, but the other concern, the subtext of that is, does his sort of embrace of him, at least in that moment, at all harm Republican plans for the midterms and their messaging to tie Democrats to Mamdani's dangerous socialist policies?
No, ma'am. As a matter of fact, it does just the exact opposite. I think President Trump is the negotiator in chief. I think he sees that a lot of the great people in New York have left there. They've come to Tennessee. Obviously, a lot of them have. But a lot of the
sort of embrace of him, at least in that moment, at all harm Republican plans for the midterms and their messaging to tie Democrats to Mamdani's dangerous socialist policies?
No, ma'am. As a matter of fact, it does just the exact opposite. I think President Trump is the negotiator in chief. I think he sees that a lot of the great people in New York have left there. They've come to Tennessee. Obviously, a lot of them have. But a lot of the good people can't get out. And I think he sees working with him as better than trying to destroy New York. And Mamdani will destroy it on his own. It won't be Trump's doing. And frankly, I think it was a great move strategically and otherwise, because both sides are scratching their heads. And we used to say in Nashville, both sides are a little uneasy. It's probably a pretty good thing. And I think Trump sees it. New York is a center of commerce, not for this country, not for New York, but for the world. And Trump sees that. And I think he wants to save that. And I applaud him for it.
There has, though, been, on the one hand, you see the president, opening the door to Zoran Mamdani, and for whatever reason, having a very cordial meeting. On the other hand, you see him going pretty publicly after Marjorie Taylor Greene, who for a long time has been one of his most staunch supporters. Here's what the president said. Do we have that soundbite?
Are you willing to forgive Congresswoman Taylor Greene?
Forgive for what? No, I just disagreed with her philosophy. She started backing perhaps the worst Republican congressman in our history, this stupid person named Massey. And I said, go your own way. And once I left her, she resigned because she would never have survived a primary.
So there's been some reporting about, the deep dive on why their relationship frayed. Some people are saying that the president didn't support her larger political ambitions and that soured the relationship. There are other people who point to her very vocal support to release the Epstein files. You have been on the side of some issues that put yourself, at loggerheads with the White House. The Epstein files, now this congressional stock trading ban, which I want to ask you about next. But my question is, so there's been some reporting about, the deep dive on why their relationship frayed. Some people are saying that the president didn't support her larger political ambitions and that soured the relationship. There are other people who point to her very vocal support to release the Epstein files. You have been on the side of some issues that put yourself, at loggerheads with the White House. The Epstein files, now this congressional stock trading ban, which I want to ask you about next. But my question is, do you think that there's room in the party for members who don't agree with the president on everything?
There's always room, man. That's the difference between us and the Democrats. They use the, as I like to say, the stick and the carrot. They reward you with the carrot or they beat you over the head with the stick. And that's why they they always vote in unison, and they never would allow a bill up until they had all their people whipped into place or bought off legally, I guess, or whichever way they do it.
The
Republican Party, man, that's our strength, really, well, not as far as we know, but because they get them in line. And that's what they do. And they know they'll be ostracized. They'll be outed. I can remember a young lady who was in, who I came to Congress with, and she got in a little bit of mess, and they all patted her on the back and said, "Oh, we love you, we love you." And then all of a sudden she drops out, and it was pretty clear that they'd gone to her and said, "Get out, or you're going to get destroyed." And that's the way they do it. They do it better behind closed doors, and we don't. We're vocal, and I think that's part of our strength. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Beatles broke up for creative differences. I'm in the South, so thank goodness Leonard Skinner never broke up for creative differences. But people are going to argue, or they're going to have differences. But I mean, President Trump's the biggest dog in the pound, ma'am, and you can take him on if you want, but the results are always the same. Okay. So about this stock trading ban, what kind of reception are you getting from the White House on this? And how likely is it that this comes to the floor for a vote? Very vocal support by President Trump. I believe they've probably done very vocal support by President Trump. I believe they've probably done some polling to show that it's one of the best polling things. I think Representative Luna told me it polls better than anything else in the country right now. And let's just face it, Congress is crooked as a dog's leg, ma'am. It is infinitely broken. And will this bill pass? Probably not, but I'm not going to quit. I keep swinging for the fence on it. And too many people are getting rich. I mean, the average stock trader in Congress is making something like 600% return. Dadgum, do like I do. Get you a mutual fund with my buddy Tommy Seiler up there, and you do pretty well with it, and you can sleep at night. But the way it's both parties, it's bipartisan support. Dadgum, me and AOC are together on something. I mean, that's just hell just frozen over. But we are, but it's bipartisan disagreement on it too. Because you look at the war in Ukraine. Look at our missile defense system. We gave Ukraine our missile defense system. Well, guess who owns stock in a lot of those missile defense systems, ma'am? Members of both parties. And from what I understood, some people bought it just weeks prior. Mm. Now, look, if you're making 600% on your returns, you ought to go to Wall Street and get out of Congress. Yeah, and something's up with your trades.
beating Warren Buffett.
I make Ukraine our missile defense system. Well, guess who owns stock in a lot of those missile defense systems, ma'am? Members of both parties. And from what I understood, some people bought it just weeks prior. Now, look, if you're making 600% on your returns, you ought to go to Wall Street and get out of Congress.
Yeah,
and it's
something's up with your trades. Beating Warren Buffett.
I make skateboards. Yes, ma'am. I make skateboards, and I gave one to Tulsi Gabbard. Now everybody all over the country wants one. I go talk to ethics because I'm a capitalist. I thought, that gum, I'll sell a few skateboards. I don't sleep at night, so from midnight to 4 a.m, I work on them. And I go to ethics, and they're like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. So you're telling me if I want to sell skateboards, I got to hire an attorney. But if I want to do insider stock trading, go to Congress. And that is exactly what's going on. Both parties are involved in it. We'll pass something probably pretty strong, and the Senate will pass something different, but we'll never come to an agreement. President Trump and the Treasury have both been vocal supporters of this from day one.
All right. Well, we will continue to watch it. Congressman Tim Burchett, thank you very much for joining the Sunday briefing, sir.
All right. It's called at the end of Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo. Hopefully you enjoyed the stream. Give us a thumbs up, all right, so I can continue streaming and giving you guys more and more information. We are living in the best presidency ever. Trump is a killer, and those who don't like it are jumping out of Congress, just like MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene. My name is Noel, over here at Verbal on Life, just being free with the internet, speaking my mind, not afraid to be canceled. But I trust me. With that said, see you guys on the next video. Peace. I see a lot of you guys are on here. That means I should see more members on the channel. I'm watching a video over here with ᗷᖇEᗩKITG. See right here, watching television, enjoying our Sunday. All right, let me get out of here. Make sure I don't get any strikes. Peace.